Hey, we're live. We are live from the Funny Farm. You're listening to the George Espenlaub Show. And we are delighted to be with you tonight. In fact, I had him here just a few seconds ago. Here he comes again. We got him now. We're delighted to have you. So whether you're down the street, around the corner, across America, or somewhere around this great big world, I trust that you will have a delightful time as you listen and watch the George Espenlaub Show tonight. Get a hold of somebody. Tell somebody that the George Espenlaub Show is live. Use your devices. Reach out. Ring a bell. Hit the gong. Whatever it takes. But tell somebody to tune in because we are now live from the Funny Farm in a place called Our World. Marty's back with us. We lost him there for a second, but now he's back. Let me wind this music down, Marty, and we'll get right to this. We'll pull this down just a little bit here and a little bit over there, and that will just about do it. Oh, my. It's wonderful when you hit the right buttons at the right time, at the right place. Usually I'll get it wrong 2 or 3 times before I get it right. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, Romans, and countrymen, we were live on the radio, and now we are live. See, Marty, I hit the wrong buttons again. Or I didn't hit the wrong button. I didn't hit the right button. How's that?
Okay, yeah, that sounds like it.
Yeah, we were live on the radio, live on YouTube, and I don't think we were live on Facebook, but we are now. Oh, my. The goodies of going live. I just love it. Love it. If there was one time we went live and nothing different happened, I don't know if I could contain myself. But you're an old television guy and a media guy, and those things happen sometimes, I guess, huh?
Technical difficulties.
Yes.
Even if it's human-oriented.
Yeah. Technical difficulties beyond our control. Isn't that what they used to say?
Yes.
Yeah. My, oh, my. Well, here we go. Here is Miss Cassandra. Good evening, George and Marty. Let's get this started, guys. All right, Miss Cassandra, down there in Arkansas. Mr. Ed Temple out of Columbus, Ohio. Awesome guest, awesome testimony. Definitely people should buy this book, but it's great to be able to hear the author speak about the book and about his story. It is really touching. This is a tearjerker, folks. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I'll share this with you. Maybe I did on the telephone. Miss Cassandra, she called me on a Friday night and said that she wanted to get your book. And she was going to download it because she wanted, she wanted something to read while she went to bed. And I told her, I said, now, Cassandra, you know that if you download Marty's book, you're not going to go to sleep until you finish that book. And lo and behold, Cassandra let me know, I think it was the next day, it happened exactly as we said. Once she started turning the pages, she couldn't quit. She's a big fan of yours, Marty.
Well, thank you. I'm honored. Thank you. It's amazing.
And then there's the good wife of 51 plus years. And she said, hi, peeps. So here we are. Wow. Let's see what this said. Now, okay. All right. Anyhow, this is the book, ladies and gentlemen. A Place for You by Marty Vargas. True story, how I found my homeless mom and how it changed my life.
Yes.
He did a documentary version, aired on PBS affiliate WHUT, Washington, D.C. Is that still available, Marty?
Yeah, I don't know if sometimes they ran it about 4 or 5 times. I don't know if they every year run it again. I have to ask them about it. It's also been in New Zealand and other places also. And but I'm just thankful that so many, I guess millions now have heard the story. So I'm thankful for that.
Jim Lublin, 3-time best-selling author and international speaker, said, "Wow, it's powerful,
Mm.
riveting, tearful, and inspiring.
Wow.
I couldn't put it down. I finished at 2 a.m. Wow."
Wow.
Miss Cassandra said, "This book touched my heart and soul."
Mm.
Yeah, it reaches way down into the fiber of your being.
Mm.
So appreciative of you, Marty, and thank the good Lord above that you were able to write such an inspiring story. You have helped, and I believe you've helped literally millions.
Mm.
You can get the book. I get these things up here right at Amazon.com. I have found when I'm looking for a book, the best thing I do, this is just me, but I go to Amazon.com and then up there in that little search thingy, type in there, Place for You or Marty Vargas, and it will jump right up at you. But that's where you can get it. So go get it. And then here's another place, A Place for You, media.com, the book, A Place for You, and you can see it right there. It'll come up. And Marty, before we get started, maybe we can tell the next time you come on, we'll talk about that incident that happened last December. How about that?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Sure.
But I'll point the people in the right direction. If you go to this website, A Place for You, media.com, you can see a little trailer, a little bit of what we're talking about. And I think once you see it, you'll be biting at the bit, saying, "Come on back, Marty. Come on back, Marty. Come on back, Marty." So that's just a little teaser we're throwing in there for everybody. And this man has so much to offer, and I'm so glad that he is with us tonight. Marty, how about giving the folks a little bit of an overview of where we were and where we ended up at?
Okay. Thank you, George. It's an honor to be on your show and an honor to be able to have the opportunity to speak to your listeners. And I can see that there are people that think deeply and care in broader ways, compassionately, because this particular type of story is one that, of course, touched my heart, but it was very hard for me to live it. I have to be honest with you. It was a tearful experience for me to having to go through every step of this. But in short, I was, found sleeping in the snow with my homeless mother. And what happened is the couple that found me sleeping in the snow, when they came and brushed off the snow from Rachel, my mom, and when she rolled over, I was underneath her clothes like this, and she raised up the child into the arms of the man that found us. His name was Catalino. And they were an older couple, and they took me in. And eventually, she didn't give me up right at that moment, but it was like several months later, and she had kept me alive at that point, about 7 months, and she surrendered me over to them. And I was very thankful years later she did that, even though I personally was very resentful that she didn't raise me. But I realized it was a choice that was a sacrificial choice for her, but also it was the right thing, because I would never have survived living in the streets with her. And I know this to be the truth, because I was out making my documentary, and I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but a woman came up to me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm making a documentary about a homeless woman that used to live here on 9th Street in Philadelphia." She said, "Rachel?" I said, "You know my mom?" She said, "Yes. We used to find the bodies of her children dead in the streets." And so I was very fortunate to be spared that experience, you know what I'm saying? And it so happened that I was about 20, 21 years old, and I went through a death-defying situation, and which you alluded to just earlier, when I was almost murdered in my own home. And it became a miracle because I lived, but that man died. And it so happened that I went after this experience, looked up into the sky and prayed to God. And I said, why am I here? Where did I come from? And little did I know that a month or two later, I was going to find those answers. And that's where I found out where I came from. A little lady who was homeless, living in the streets up to this time for over 20 years. And it so happened that my brother had passed away and he had died while in California visiting with me. They transported his body back to Philadelphia, or the New Jersey, Philadelphia area. And it was during that time that Joanne, my cousin, came up to me and said, Marty, would you like to find your mom? And I said, who is she? Her name is Rachel, and she's living in the streets. And that shocked me. And of course, that began the story that we talked about last week, how we combed the streets and different nooks and crannies, and also the Italian market, which is famous in the movie Rocky, where he's running down the Italian market and the Italian people are selling things out of the market. Well, my mother lived in that area for over 20 plus years. And of course, she haunted different areas around Philadelphia. And what was so devastating about the story is that after I found her, I wanted to know who her father was. And the reason why I'm so free to share this now is because for many years I would never share. It took me years to share the story about my mother, but it was even harder for me to share the story about my father. And when I asked who my father was, my mother responded, I was Nan. Nan was my brother that we had just buried. And that was the reason why we came to Philadelphia. And I was confused, and then I realized that he was my father. And not, my blood brother being my father. Because as you very well know, when I was adopted, I was actually adopted by my grandparents. And they did not know they were my grandparents. But they adopted me. They took me from Rachel, took care of me, etc., not realizing I was their very own grandson. And so that made their son my brother. In reality, he was really my father. And he had traveled all the way from the East Coast to California to tell me to own up to being my father. And while he was there visiting us, he had a massive heart attack before he could tell me that he was my father, and he passed away. That event itself precipitated the search for my mother. And in finding my mother, I found out who my real father was. And I'm very thankful that he was man enough. God had come into his life. He wanted to make things right. And I think about so many children out there that don't know their father, and how many of them would long and yearn to have that bonding with their father. And how many fathers out there feeling the guilt that oppresses their personal heart and not acting on that, not trying to make good in their situation to bond and to become a father in the life of one of their children. And so that was devastating to me. And to find out, and it's like something that assembles in your mind that you can't even make sense out of, at the time. The emotional experience, it was so deep. I broke down. I was crying. I couldn't even stop crying because I loved him as my brother, not realizing he was my real natural father. And then to feel the pain, because what precipitated this is I was sitting there looking at my mom, and I asked her, and she said, Nan, and I looked at her and I said, well, we just buried Nan. That's why we came here. He's dead. He had a massive heart attack. And one little tear began to stream down her face, and that moved me without control, I'm telling you. And it's like suddenly I sensed and felt the echo of her own personal pain. She had loved him. Now she's finding out he's gone. And at that moment, it was unbelievable for me, and unbelievable for her. We never talked about it much after that, but even though we had small conversations. And so for your listeners, I had made so many journeys to Philadelphia. My mother spurred me over and over and over again. She would never come back with me. I would try to trick her to get into the car, and she would kind of touch the seat and say, "Oh, this is a nice car," and then she would never get in. I could never get her. And of course, we lived, we loved, we laughed together in the streets. I became a part of that homeless world because I would stay up until 4 o'clock in the morning, take care of her, wash her hair, wash her hands and feet. And I would come and bring her clothes and food. And all these things I did trying to see if she would come back to me. Now, of course, I didn't meet her. And for those who weren't here last week, I didn't meet her and then initially decide for her to come home with me. What happened was, after in the initial meeting and finding her, I left and trying to make sorts and trying to figure out this whole scenario and this whole experience in my mind. And with the big question mark, why? That was like haunting me so much. But what happened is something was motivating me to go back to her. And I can only say it was the love of God because I can't say it was my love. Because I felt an obligation. It was like something innate within me saying, this is your mom. And I had no one to reason with over this. No one talked to me about saying you should do this and you should do that. My family knew, my mother and father knew that this was my mom. They knew the story. Because after I was 13, the adoption papers went through, and that's when they found out that I was their actual grandson. No one actually told me what to do in this situation, other than the fact that I realized I knew what I need to do. I knew what I had to do. And so that's when I quit college. I was a good student, and I was attending Pacific Union College, a private institution in the Napa Valley area. And I gave up everything. Excuse me. I gave up everything. My finances. I made 5 trips back and forth to Philadelphia. I mean, I did everything I can. And of course, she rejected me every single time. Initially, she rejected me with curses and F me this, F you this, but for some reason, I just let it go like this, and I didn't take it personal. And then I began to study her in the streets. I took a notepad. I wrote down everything she said. I surveyed her environment. I tried to find the answer to the questions that pricked my heart. Why is she living in the streets? She had family not too far away. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. I went into the details of her personal life from what I understood from interviews with people, from reading articles written about her in the newspaper, and going through medical records. And so I was able to put together, like a journalist and like a researcher, to look at it I wouldn't say analytical perspective, but somewhat from an investigative perspective, which in some cases became a little analytical, and trying to figure out why she ended up where she is. And I will say that maybe for another interview, or maybe for the readers to get the book, because, she was a normal person just like you and me. She had feelings just like you and me. She washed and cleaned every day. Twice she took a bath. It wasn't like she was just some crazy that decided, I'm going to live in the streets. There was a series of events that precipitated her and led her into that deplorable situation and then kept her there, And so I'm trying to get her off, but she don't want to come off. And it came down to the point where I decided I'm going to kidnap her. And that day I remember I was out there just watching the police go by, and I said, okay, they're coming by every 10 minutes, And we took some drugs and I put it in her coffee, and she fell asleep, put her head on my lap, and I signaled for a car. I grabbed her and started racing her, and she broke loose from me. She says, I'm not going, And it was so terrible because at that point I didn't know what to do, and I continued to reason with her until 4 a.m. in the morning in the blistering cold. And I remember saying to her, Mom, I want you to come home with me. I got a place prepared for you. And at that moment, her eyes began to swell with tears. And she said to me, I want to, but I'm afraid. And at that moment, I did the hardest thing I ever done in my life. I let her go. I let her go. And when I arrived at the airport, broke down when the ticket agent asked me, is she traveling with me? Because, they just have information. This is Bronco Lasso coming with. I said, no, and it's just the failure resonated so deeply. And it was like an avalanche of tears that just poured out of my eyes, and I just couldn't believe that I had believed so much. I had so much faith, but it didn't work. It didn't work. And there was a reason. It wasn't time yet. You know what I'm saying? And everyone has to make decisions in their life, and they have to want something, And so I went back to California after that experience and did all that I can. And then eventually I got a job in New York. And that put me within 2 hours of Philadelphia. And so I felt that was providential. And I started traveling all the way down to Philadelphia, still trying to find my mother, get her off the streets, go down on holidays, buy her gifts. She was still cursing me out. And it was really bad. It was really bad. It was like wearing me away, because every time I was reaching out to her, she was spurning me. Every time I was trying to demonstrate love and care. And as you very well know from the last interview, I had to choose to love her. And then after I chose to love her, all the love just started just pouring out of me towards her. I felt real sympathy. I felt real empathy. Prior to that, I felt like maybe part of me was doing it out of duty, but I realized she needed to sense real love in order to trust again. And having been raped so many times in the streets, having been beat and battered, bullied, her teeth were missing because someone had beat her so badly. And the trust issue, of course, wasn't there. And so after I initially gave myself into just choosing to love her, the love began to flow. And so I kept on coming. I kept on coming no matter how deplorable it was. One time she was just filled with lice head to toe. You know what I'm saying? And you could see from some of the documentary pictures what it really was like. And I would come down, but no changes. No changes. I would pray with her. I would talk with her. I would sing to her. And I would feed her. I would spend hours and hours, sometimes all day, all night, nearly sometimes with her. And no change. And finally, it was as though everything was a failure. And you kind of, resign yourself to the reality, okay, But something wouldn't let me do that for some reason. And then I had a phone call. My adoptive brother that lived in Philadelphia, his name was Eddie, he called me. And he said, they took your mother off the streets. She's in Pennsylvania hospital. And the hospital has declared they would not have released her to anyone but you. And I was like, wow, this is a miracle, And I was so mind-blowing because I had expended so much energy, finances, to the point that it exhausted me. And then suddenly I was going to have her. And another thing that was kind of blew my mind is that the neighborhood and everyone around there knew that I had invested everything for her. They knew who I was without ever talking to me. They saw this drama outside in the streets, on the corner, everywhere, and people talked about it until finally the authorities realized this is the person, And so this is what happened. I went down to Pennsylvania Hospital. I got my mother, and I remember traveling all the way up to New York, all the way up I-95, New Jersey Turnpike. And I'm telling you, it was one of the most stressful moments of my entire life. My mother was grabbing the door, and you could hear boom, 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 boom. She was trying to break out. and trying to roll down the window. Thank God for child locks, All I can imagine is if she jumped out of my car, she'd be threaded by all these cars on the highway. And I'm telling you, that was one experience. Finally, by relief, we entered into Flushing, New York. And I was living in a 3-story, down there in Philadelphia, they would call it row house. Up here, we call it 3-family home. And I was in the 2nd story. And I remember as we sat her for dinner, that my mother didn't sit at the table. She squatted down, on the floor to eat, because she was so much in the habit of doing that. And so I had to retrain her how to sit at the table, how to have manners, how to be a part of everything in society, And it was a great adjustment for her. And I could tell that she loved being there. She loved being with us. She loved being a part of us. But she had this propensity still to run away. And she would run away at night, and I would have to go all night looking for her on my bicycle. It was terrible. I mean, time after time, the police cars were coming to the house, and I had to fill out missing persons reports, and it was just terrible. And, I mean, she ran away numerous times. And, of course, I would find her eventually. And I remember one time she was, came back to the house to do something, go through the mail or whatever. And I saw her and I started running after her. And I may have told this story last time, but I threw my arms around her and I grabbed her like this, and she started screaming. And so she started rolling me along the car. So you can imagine all these parked cars, right? And boom, she has me rolling all over, and I'm struggling with it. And this guy pulls up and he screams out, "Hey, lady, you need help?" And I cried out, "No, she's my mom. She's not well." And he said, "Oh, no." He took off, He didn't know what to do, And it was just amazing. And finally, she slipped out of my grip. She was so strong, even at that age, and she disappeared elsewhere. And I'm like, wow, can't believe this. You know what I'm saying? And one day, and eventually we found her. I think she was sleeping in a park somewhere, and she came home. And then, it was like up and down with her. We would take her to church. She would love singing. She loved Thanksgiving. She loved, the holidays. We had good times. So it was like this wonderful home experience, family experience. And then somehow that would break. Something else would happen, and she would disappear. And the next time, it was very interesting when she disappeared. She ran away. And of course, I was searching for her all over. And I was in my Oakland Raiders jacket, and I had my cap on. I was riding my swim bicycle through the night. And I came to this corner of Northern Boulevard and Main Street, Flushing. And I was standing, and I had my binoculars, and I was out there looking for her, And suddenly this prostitute comes up to me, right? And this prostitute says, "Hey, I'll give you a 10% discount." And I said, "No, I'm not interested." She said, No, I'll give you an introductory offer, 10%. I said, No. I said, "I'm on a mission." And she looked at me, and her eyes popped open, her mouth dropped. She says, "I'm on a mission too." And at that moment, I just ignored her. And as I was looking out there, I spotted her, my mother. And it was just movement between two large dumpsters. She was hiding between two dumpsters, And so I signaled for a car. I walked up. I got right next to the dumpster, and I was like this, and she was right here. And when at the right moment, I jumped and grabbed her and picked her up and threw her in the car and all the way back home, And I was livid that night. I couldn't believe it, because I was like, how can you do this to me? It was like putting my nerves to the ultimate, stress, because I was so afraid that she'd get out there hit by a car, murdered, raped. I mean, we're in a city that she's not familiar with. And it was just so stressful. I couldn't believe it. It was so, so, so stressful. And then one day, it was a summer day. It was in June. I remember that. And I was sitting there, and you could feel the breeze at night. And I went to sleep, and I heard ching, 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 ching of the blinds. And I said, "Oh, the wind." And I fell back to sleep. In the morning when I woke up, Rachel wasn't there. I was like, "Whoa, hold on. Where's Rachel?" And so I opened the door and I ran down the steps, and the very moment the downstairs door flung open, there she was lying on the concrete shaking. And I looked up and I realized she had jumped from my second story window. Mm-hmm. I picked her into my arms and her whole body was just trembling. And she went, "Oh, Marty," like that. The ambulance sped up, and the blare lights, the sirens and everything, we put her in the ambulance. When I got to the hospital, the doctor said to me, "I can't believe she's not screaming. She broke 8 bones in her body. She broke her femur, she broke many ribs, she broke her arm, she had part of her leg. I mean, she was all broken up, I'm telling you." And it was like, okay, that landed her in a VIP room in the nut house. You talk about the funny farm. She ended up at Creedmoor Psychiatric Center. And Creedmoor is a story, it has some really people that really need a lot of help. There was one man, he escaped from Creedmoor by tying, now I'm not trying to give anyone ideas out there, but tying sheets together. He tied so many sheets together, and this was during the time my mother was there. He did one of the Spider-Mans outside of the window and went down 13 stories. Can you imagine that? And he got away, and I think eventually they caught him, But my mother was in this, and I remember the day I went to go visit her, and I went up into the elevator, and of course the elevator opens, and then of course you press the button, and then they allow you in. And I remember going through that security door, and when the door went chung, and kind of vibrates, and then it echoes down the hallway, I was standing there by myself, and 5 guys surrounded me. And of course, some of them were gyrating and making very intimidated approaches towards me. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? They're going to attack me. It's like watching them every second. And it's like, there's no one around, only these 5 guys, and I'm here to visit my mother, Suddenly, when I thought they were going to attack, the intensity dissipated when an orderly came up and shooed them away. And he said, "Your mother, she's over there." And I remember when I got to the room where my mother was, she was silhouetted with this bright light beaming through the window, only diffused by a light white curtain. And there she was, sitting in the wheelchair. And the very first thing she says to me, said, "Marty, get me out of here. I ain't no cuckoo person." I said, "Really?" I said, "You're the one that jumped from the window." And she raised her arm up like, yeah, and the cast was there, and she dropped it back down, "Get me out of here, Marty. I don't want to be here. I ain't cuckoo." I said, okay. So eventually, after she spent her time there, which wasn't very long, but, when you jumped out of a second-story window, break 8 bones in your body, of course, they think you're suicidal. And it's very interesting. I want a backstory on that for a moment. Because one day I asked her, "Why did you jump out of the window? That's crazy." And she said to me, "Marty, I was sitting there and I was enjoying living with you and everything. And something said, 'Go to the window.' And another voice said to me, 'Don't do it.' And as I was standing there going to the window, something said to me, 'Jump.' And something said, 'Don't do it.' And I decided to do it, And at that moment, I realized the conflict, the struggle, the unseen forces, the spiritual struggle that was going on in her. She wanted to do the right thing. and she made the choice to do the wrong thing. And so she eventually came out of the institution. And I remember taking her to the ocean. And this really blew my mind because I put a blanket out on the white sand and I carried her all the way on Jones Beach, all the way out to the water. Not to the water, but where she could see the water clearly and was close. And I went back to go get food. And as I was trekking my way through the white sand, carrying this heavy basket of food, I put it right down next to her, and I noticed she was crying. And I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said to me, "I've never seen the ocean before. I've never seen the ocean." And I was like, it blew my mind. How can you be that old and you've never seen the ocean? And I realized her life was all wound up. You know, she was a captive in her life, having lived so many years in the streets and so much of life that she actually missed, so much of life that went past her, you know, her children, me, just life in general. And that really struck me because I ocean, see those waves come crashing down in the soft sand and rolling in and out, you know. And so I'm sorry, I don't want to keep on going. If you had any questions for me.
Keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I was like so amazed that she had missed out on life. And I remember taking her camping upstate New York, and we were staying in a cabin, not kind of like roughing it, but in a cabin. And I remember her sitting out on the step. And she said, "You know, Marty, I like it here. No one bothers you. No one bothers you here. No one kicks you. No one kicks you." And that was painful to hear that, you know, to think that, you know, your own mother was treated as though she was a nothing. And I think, I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you, but I think what happens is when people are in an unfortunate situation, we oftentimes view that as their test in life. You know, that's their test. In reality, no, it's not their test, it's my test. It's my test of how I'm going to treat somebody who is in an unfortunate circumstance.
That's right. That's right.
You know, do I have compassion? Do I have love? Will I help? Will I help them? Or will I just simply just like sit back and say, "Okay, you know, too bad for you. Thank God it didn't happen to me." You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It was my test. And I realized it's everyone's test in life. And so my mother enjoyed a happy life, a really beautiful, happy life, but it didn't stop her from running away. And it was something so, you know, you could take your mother out of the streets, but you can't take the streets out of your mother. Right. You know what I'm saying? And that's what was happening. I was dealing with what was inside of her so deeply, you know, so powerfully. And it was pulling her in so many ways. And so, but I kept on working with her. And of course, she ran away again. And this time when she ran away, and there were other runnings away in between, you know, she ended up in another institution. And then from there, it stair-stepped to an adult living home, assisted living home. And at this point, I was transferred away all the way upstate for my job, and I would travel all the way down to Long Island and visit with her, and just like, oh. But still, she would smoke her cigarettes, blow it in my face, and tell me to leave and get out of here. It was like she was so resentful that I took her off the streets. Like, how can you be resentful that I took you off the streets? I mean, what's wrong with you? You know, can't you see it? You know, it was so frustrating. And, you know, and then you got tired of being treated like garbage, you know. But, you know, I was never violent or anything like that. I was just like blowing my mind, you know. But then she got very ill while she was in Long Island. And she caught pneumonia several times because she would leave the assisted care place and she would go out and sit in the street. It's like, and she caught pneumonia about 4 or 5 times, almost died. And the 5th time was really bad. She ended up in Plainview Hospital in Long Island. And the doctor, I remember his name clearly, said to me, don't hold for anything. They wanted to cut the trachea. She was 2 weeks with a tube down her throat. And they wanted to cut the trachea into her, throat. And I declined. He said, you don't know what, he was upset about that, etc. And he says, look, I said, no. And for some reason, I wasn't quite ready for her like that. And he said, well, she's uncomfortable. And I said, I started praying about it. And this is what happened. They wanted to do the surgery on a Thursday. On a Tuesday, I went with a friend of mine and my little boy, Isaiah, who was just 6 years old, I think, at the time. And we went to go pray for her. Thursday, they were going to do the operation, but I had declined the operation. And then I was trying to call them. Maybe you should do it, blah, blah. And I couldn't reach them. They never did it. On Friday, my mother began to breathe on her own. It was a miracle. And she got so well that she came out of the hospital. It was just beautiful. She got so well. And she was bragging to everybody that Jesus had healed her. And my mother and she never talked like that. She would say, Jesus, heal me. Jesus, heal me. And she was so excited, And I was like, my mother's changing. Okay, we're getting somewhere now, And I was so excited. And then what happened was she was transferred because now she couldn't stay with anybody. She had to go to a rehab and she had to go to a nursing home. And so they transferred her to a nursing home in Babylon. And so it happened that my job transferred me to Babylon too, unrelated. I didn't ask for a transfer to the town Babylon. This is like a miracle and a half, what I'm saying? So she gets transferred, I get transferred, and so I was in walking distance where she was. I could ride my bike, and that's what me and my son would do. We would go ride the bike and see Grandma, And you would think she would be so excited that my son is coming to see me, And so I would come in, hi, Mom, how you doing? And she'd roll over like, leave me alone. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, oh, Lord have mercy. And it was like every single time I went, it was just like she just rolled over. Don't bother me. Don't bother. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Marty, leave me alone. That Philadelphia accent. And I'm like, whoa, I mean, you should be happy you're not living in the streets. And say, okay, you know what I'm saying? But she wasn't, it was just a bother to her. And it kind of bewildered my son. He was young at that time, but he loved her. And I really respect my son for loving my mom because he saw her differently than many people saw her. The people who knew her as a homeless woman who had lived umpteen years in the street, some type of fixture in the street, a crazy homeless person. That's how they viewed my mom. I saw my mom as my mom who needed healing. My son saw her as grandma. And that brought some type of semblance of family into the mold. You know what I'm saying? And so time and time again. And then one day, okay, let me tell you what happened. One day, I come in here, and she's in the dining commons, okay, and they're eating and enjoying their little meals, the little old ladies do in these places. And this is what happened. She started giving me trouble again. And the little old lady sitting at the same table says to her, why you treat your son like that? Why you treat him so bad? Because they would see me come all the time, and no one visit. Usually when you end up in a nursing home, unless a church comes to sing, very few people ever come to visit people, And so I walked away, and I started just playing the piano and enjoying playing the piano and entertained the little old ladies sitting in the dining room. And so I left. And then when I came back, I think it was the next time I came back, I think those words haunted my mom. She said to me, I want to go home and live with you. And I'm like, what? Suddenly, I was just like, oh, no. I remember the police reports, jumping out of the window, all these problems happening. You know what I'm saying? I'm just like, wow. Okay, and let me think about it. And so I didn't grab it. I was like, at this point, I don't want any more police coming to my house. I don't want anyone jumping out of my window, breaking eight bones in the body. I don't want to go through this type of madness ever again. You know, it's just, this is not for me. And this is what happened. I took about a week and I came back and I said, okay. So we tried it, you know what I'm saying? And she came to live with me. And I had a friend of mine by the name of Ambrosina, used to help me, an old lady. Yeah, not old lady, but, you know, she was about 70-something years old and very sweet lady, would help me with my mom. And it was really nice. I got her on the daycare system. I got nurses' aides and everything, but I took a lot of care for her. And she would do some crazy stuff, I'm telling you. Every night when I was sleeping, she would come up and wake me up 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, calling my name. I said, why are you calling my name? She says, I want to make sure you're still here. I said, I didn't go anywhere. I mean, I'm going to sleep. Leave me alone. You know, I mean, this is the real stuff, right? You know? And she enjoyed her program that she went through every single day. She loved it. She had interaction with other people, etc. So one day she came up to me and I was sleeping. Of course, it was midnight. And she woke me up again. I said, you're not going to your program. She said, okay, Marty, I get it. So that put an end to that. I had to do about 3 times and follow through one time on my threat and didn't let her go to the program. But now I could sleep. You know what I'm saying? Now I could sleep. And it so happened, this was amazing. It just came to my mind. I didn't even think I would remember this. One day, I walked into her room and she was slumped over like this in her chair. I called the ambulance and the paramedics checked her out and they said, look, don't hope for anything. Don't hope for anything. They took her to the hospital. It was Good Samaritan Hospital. I lived about 5 minutes from Good Samaritan Hospital in Long Island. And then they transferred her on Community Drive, and I believe it's NASA Community Hospital. I forget. You know, it's NASA. It's the big one, university one that's there in Manhasset. And the doctor came out, you know, and he was just like a young doctor, a young Jewish dude. He comes out with another young Jewish doctor, and they said, look, this is a situation, you know. And they put up her, you know, what do they call it, x-rays and everything, and they showed me her arteries to her heart and all that. They said, okay, look, if we do open heart surgery, she's going to die on the table, so we're not going to do that. If we go in and try to do an angioplasty on her, she's going to die, so we're not going to try. And so I said, you know, I thought, okay, you're going to let my mom die, right? You know. And they asked me this question, what do you want to do? It's like, okay, the 2 options is my mom's going to die. You asking me what I want to do? It's like, you're crazy. You know what I'm saying? So I looked at the Jewish doctor, the young Jewish doctor, and I said to him, a question he'll never forget, I know. I said, if it was your mother, what would you do? He was stunned. He's like, look, his head dropped. And he was thinking. It felt like it was like an eternity, like 5 minutes of just thinking. He looked up at me and he said, I put her on medication. I said, then do that. Put her on medication. My mother got well enough. She came out of the hospital. She lived for many more years, you know. And it's very interesting. She was comical too. My mother had emphysema, COPD, whatever they call it, COPD. And she had difficulty breathing because she had smoked all those years in the streets and so forth. And that's what caused her to have a paralyzed arm, you know. And so she was always, you know, feeling like she couldn't breathe, you know. And so I had a Mustang convertible. You may know these, you know, because you're a man and men, you really like it, cars. I had an 89 white Mustang convertible. And I think for the Mustangs, the 89 was like one of the most beautiful years, you know. And we dropped the top, you know, and we'd go for cruises. I'd take my mother and her hair would be flying all over the place. And I remember one day I put her in the car, dropped the top, and the windows were still up, but the top was down. And she said, Marty. I said, what? Roll down the window. I can't breathe. I said, Mom. I said, Mom, the top is down. What are you talking about? And so we just busted out laughing. She realized it too. And she just started busting out laughing, you know. And so my mother used to do some crazy stuff. And one of the things she used to do is that even in winter, because of her, I guess, COPD, she felt like she couldn't breathe. So she always like, Marty, open the window. And I was like, Mom, it's winter outside. I'm not going to open the window, you know. Open the window. And she bothered me for a half hour, you know. And then I have to pull my favorite line. Look, you don't stop. You're not going to the program tomorrow. And so she would get it finally, you know, like, finally I'm going to get it. And so it was really cute, you know, and I'd take her places. Carnegie Hall, wheeled her in the wheelchair. She loved it. Take her to the ocean, let her sit there and watch the sand and the beach and, of course, the seagulls, and take her to the park to watch the ducks and everything, you know, when she wanted to. Because, you know, usually when they get at that age, they're like, want to be sedentary, don't bother, don't want to do anything. And then my mother had this paralyzed arm. But I realized from that experience how she manipulated me. Because up to this time, I was like, yeah, they do. They're smarter than we are. You know that. Yeah. And she would do stuff like, Marty, give me a blanket. Okay, I go get a blanket. Marty, put up my legs. Okay, I put up your legs. Marty, go get me this. Marty, go do this. I'm like, all over the place, right? And so it was like really something else. And so one day, she used to listen to family radio back in the way back days, you know, and they used to always sing these like classical, you know, songs and sacred classical songs and stuff, etc. And she liked the station. And she even told me the announcer was handsome. I said, how do you know? It's just a voice. That's what she said. And so it was so funny. And then one day she had this, I don't know if you had this experience, George, but right when I'm leaving the house, she wants me to do something. I'm like, have an appointment. I'm going to be late. Marty, go do this for me. I said, what are you talking about? You had 3 hours to let me know about this, and now I have to leave, and you're going to tell me to do it this now? Oh, come on, leave me alone. I got to go, right? So it so happened that for some reason, her radio went off dial. You know, she lost the station somewhere. I said, Marty, look at my arm. She threw their arm out at me, you know. Look at my arm, you know, help me. No, Mom, I got to go. Jump in my car, all right? I just whiz off to my meeting. I come back 4 hours later, okay, maybe even 5. I come back, and the station is exactly on the right frequency, the right channel on the right dial. I mean, it was boom, and it was blasting away, and she was enjoying it. And I looked at her, and I'm like, looked at her arm, looked at her arm, looked at her, like, and then I realized she was just manipulating me, you know. And then I said, okay, you know. So then I started to get her to do everything that she could do, you know what I'm saying? And then she began to progress. You know, she got better, you know, physically she could do this and that. I mean, you know, she wasn't jogging or anything, but the little stuff she was always demanding for me to do, making me like a jackrabbit, like, you know, crazy. No, that ain't happening anymore. And so she would do things like that. And then one of the things that she really was really proud of, because I got to talk about her successes too, you know. My mother was not a failure. If you read my book and you go back through her life, if any of us went through what she went through, we would never have made it. I'm going to be honest with you.
That's right.
And one of the things that I got from my mother was persistence. You know, the ability or the desire or the tenacity, whatever you want to call it, you know, and not giving upness, you know, that type of thing, and perseverance. And that I got from her. But one day she was so proud. She went to her medical model daycare, and they had a big jar of jelly beans, you know, and everyone had to guess how many jelly beans were in there. And one guy just 200, no, 500, 1,000, no, My mother came off and she said 2,700. And it was like within the ballpark. And she won this big rabbit. And she was so proud, you know. And I was so happy for her, you know, it was an accomplishment that she made. And another thing, she was very happy about my son Isaiah. My son Isaiah and her have the same type of eyes, these beautiful brown eyes. And she would always say, he has my eyes, Marty, doesn't he? He has my eyes. I'd say, yeah, Mom, he has your eyes. And she was so, so happy. But one thing my mom would do, I don't know if your audience is interested in this, but she would sit there and reminisce, and that's how I got leads for my story. She would sit there and talk, and she would tell me things, and sometimes it would come out at the most crazy moment. It was just like, oh, okay. And so I would take note of that, and I would jot it down, or I put it in my memory bank. And one time she said, Marty, I used to be a stripper. I'm like, what? Stripper? What are you talking about, stripper? She said, yeah. I was like, my mother, a stripper? Boy. She said, yeah, Marty, I used to strip. And then I used to prostitute. And I'm like, whoa, this is getting too heavy now, you know what I'm saying? And of course, and I read some articles about my mom in the newspaper where she used to dance at a club. And then I was like, whoa, that's the type of dance he must have been. You know what I'm saying? I was like, whoa, that's what it meant, because I wasn't in part of that world. That was never part of my world. And I was like, whoa. And so in the book, I write about her experience as a stripper and her tenacity to try to keep us alive and keep me alive as a little baby and out of the streets. Fortunately and unfortunately, she had lost her job, which precipitated her again the second time to live out in the streets. But it was, at least she didn't have to live that lifestyle anymore. But, I began to know and learn all these things. And as my mom would sit there and she would reminisce way back in the past, and I would begin to understand her story better, And, she had a great love for her sister. But one of the reasons why she couldn't stay with her sister is that my mother used to smoke incessantly and put her cigarette butts out on the windowsill. And, of course, her sister had 5 children. That ain't going to happen. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so my mother resented her sister for not allowing her to stay there. But her sister had no other choice, you know what I'm saying, in that situation. I won't go into the backstory why her husband threw her out and how she and I ended up living in, abandoned buildings and alleyways. I'll say that for the book because it's really a very descriptive type of thing. But my mother changed. Her life changed. And what I saw progressively, that she began to change and she became a happier person. And she could hold a conversation like you and I. She was no longer crazy, if you want to call it that. She was just hurt. And now she was receiving healing. Her life was changing. She had a family. She had love. No one ever knew that she lived about total 28 years living in the streets. No one ever knew. And she was sweet. She was adorable. She was kind. She was compassionate. She was loving. Everything good, And I was so proud. Sometimes I walk in her room and I said, what are you doing? Because, when she was living in the streets, she used to talk to herself. And I would say, what are you talking to yourself? No, I'm not talking to myself. I'm talking to Jesus. So I would catch her praying. And I realized that she was having her own relationship with God. And then one day, I used to always pray with my mom and read it like a Bible text or story out of the Bible. And I always used to pray this prayer, open my eyes that I might see the wonderful love you have for me. And I kind of made it like a rhyme. And one day we were studying about the blind man and how Jesus healed the blind man. And she looked at me and she said, Marty, I know who you are. I said, I know who I am. I'm Marty. She said, you're not Marty. You're Jesus. And I'm like, what? No, I'm not Jesus. I'm Marty. You know what I'm saying? No, you're Jesus. And I'm no way like Jesus, by any means. But then I realized, it dawned on me what it meant to her, that I was Jesus to her, meaning I was the person God used to help her, And then I began to realize her eyes opened. Her eyes opened. She began to see the things that we were doing for her. And it wasn't me. It was because of God. There's nothing good in me that I could say, I'm like Jesus, No, it was God using my son, using me, using us to help her come to healing. And that's when I saw a turning point in my mom. There was no longer that desire to kind of like run away anymore. It was over. Even though one day she did threaten me, Marty, give me ice cream. I said, Mom, you ate all the ice cream. What are you talking about? Marty, give me ice cream. No, Mom, you ate the ice cream. It's gone. Go get me ice cream. No, it's cold outside. I'm not getting ice cream. She says, I'm going to leave. And I said to her, go ahead and leave. It's cold out there. You want a blanket? And she started looking at me. She laughed. And she said, no, Marty, I was crazy for doing that, wasn't I? I was cuckoo, she said. I said, yeah. And she realized. She finally woke up, And there's so many other stories. I won't tell them now. But it was her life. And it changed my life. It changed my life. It taught me how to love. It taught me how to respect people that are in bad situations. It taught me how to have compassion. And it taught me to understand, And it taught me to deal with me, to deal with my own personal pride, and to let that go, to let go of the pride that kind of like closets you in, and the pride that keeps you from reaching out to love other people the way I believe God wants us to love other people, And for that reason, that's why I wrote the book, A Place for You.
Wow. When you said about me, if we just let God do a work in me, it's not my brother, it's not my sister. There's an old song that we used to sing back in church, not my brother, not my sister, and I forget how it all goes. But it's me, oh Lord, that's in the need of prayer. Me. We mentioned it last time, Marty. We're just moving so fast that many people, far too many people, don't take the time just to sit down and think about me. Look inward. It's easy for all of us, isn't it, to look outward. His fault, it's her fault, it's this reason, it's that reason, it's because of these many things, when it possibly could just be me. And I've heard people over the years say, and I've said it in my 71 years, I'm sure, if I could just get over there, or if I could just go there. And my wife and I was talking about this morning, the only problem with that is if I go there, that means that I go there. So whatever problem I was over here, I'm going to be over there. If we can just start with me, myself, look inward, examine me, oh Lord, and then sit there long enough to let him put the spotlight on you and give you the results. You know what I'm saying? Because as soon as we start to see a little bit of ugly, we're up and gone. No, I don't want to look at this. I don't want to see that. I don't want to hear that. It's an incredible journey, Marty. And I have gained and learned so much from these 2 times that we have spent together. You said last time, and I haven't forgotten, I've been thinking about it continually, when you was at the airport, and the lady said, is your mother going to be traveling with you? Is she here? And you said no. And it hit you. And all of a sudden, you surrendered. After the many trips back and forth, the endless nights, in the weather, on the streets. And now, all of a sudden, it hit you on this time in the airport. You surrender. You said that the last time, and I have been continuously thinking about it. Surrender. Okay. His ways aren't my ways, because if they were, If his ways were like my ways, all things would really be messed up, tore up. And his thoughts are not my thoughts. That place of surrender. God has done a magnificent work on you, Marty. And one only needs to listen to you, and one only needs to look at you to understand that God has done this whole miraculous work. And you are so, so right when you say that there's no righteousness in us. Our righteousness is but filthy rags. It's all Him. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, let me put this up here because you really need to get this book. My, oh my. And here's where you can get it. Go to Amazon.com. Right there. And type in up there in that little search box thingy. A place for you, or Marty Vargas. It'll pop right up. Tremendous, tremendous story. There's so much more that's in the pages of that book than what Marty spoke about. Or you could go here, aplaceforyoumedia.com/the book. My, oh my. And then this is another comment. It's a must-read book. Once I started reading it, I couldn't put it down until I was done. It's an amazing, true story. My, oh my, oh my. So, ladies and gentlemen, please get this. And do us another favor. Please tell people about the show tonight, because after the show, Marty, last week, people just continually started watching and watching and watching and watching and watching and watching and watching. And we were getting comments and comments and comments. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you were privileged enough tonight to see this or listen to it on the radio, please tell someone else. Let them have the experience of listening to this man share this story, and then get that book. Get that book. Marty, we have another session coming up. We'll get together and we'll schedule that one too. How's that?
Sounds great, George. Thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful privilege.
Oh, it's been a wonderful, wonderful 2 times. We've got another one coming. We'll schedule that. And only the good Lord knows what's down the road and around the corner. And if He so chooses, then He so chooses. And whatever. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. And I thank Him for that. I thank you, Marty. I thank Him for you. Tremendous, tremendous story. So, ladies and gentlemen, wow. It almost leaves you breathless. Tremendous story. Please get the book. Please tell other people about the show tonight. And you can still see the show that we had. When was it, Marty? Last week? 10 days ago? Whatever it was.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah. You can see that too. So please tell everybody of what's going on around here. A place for you. Jesus said, let not your heart be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there ye may be also. For in my Father's house there are many mansions. If it were not so, I told you, but I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there ye may be also. And Marty's book is titled, A Place for You. Oh, my goodness gracious. Sakes alive, Aunt Sally. Oh, my goodness gracious. Anyhow, yep, when you hear that, we're just about done. We're just about out of here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, Romans and countrymen. Oh, my. Whether you're down the street, around the corner, across America, somewhere around this great big world, thank you for tuning in tonight. Thank you for following this man's story. Look him up. Look him up. Marty Vargas. My. He is very well spoken, and he's got an anointing on his life. It's a ministry, ladies and gentlemen. It's a ministry with an anointing, and that's what makes the difference, the anointing. Marty, God bless you, my brother.
Thank you, George. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
I'll be ringy-dinging you up there in New York.
Okay.
We'll be talking soon, my brother. Thank
you.
Thank you so very, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, because it's you, the listeners, that tunes in every day, every night, whenever we're on the air. You make it happen. We want to be better, and we want to make the show bigger for you. We want to bring a smile to your lips, maybe make you laugh. And yeah, we'll make you just as goofy as the rest of us. But until tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. No, it's not Daylight Time. Come on, Espenlaub, it's Eastern Time. Oh, we done turned the clocks back, and it gets dark now at 4:30. Anyhow, until tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. This is George Espenlaub and the whole crew here at the Funny Farm saying thank you for tuning in. If it's nighttime, have a great night. If it's already tomorrow, it's already daytime, you have a great day. But regardless of where you're at and what time it is, until then, thank you for tuning in. Be kind to one another. Help one another. And I pray that God will keep you right in the center of his hand. Good night, everybody.